Welcome back to Young Smart Money with me, your host, Apple Crider. Today we are sitting down with Suzanne Stavertlich, aka the founder of Arvabelle, a YouTube channel that's got about 46,000 subscribers on it right now, where she focuses on investing, the stock market, and really just breaking things down very simply for people so they can get started building those good financial habits. Now, in this episode, we're going to be diving deep into Suzanne's personal finances. So, specifically, how she was able to buy a house at 23 years old from her YouTube and freelance income. We're going to dive into her path to going full-time on YouTube. And then we're also going to cover some of the ups and downs that come along with being a self-employed person when it comes to personal finances, taxes, investing, etc. So if you're an influencer yourself or an inspiring creator, you're going to learn a ton in this episode, a lot of stuff that most other influencers aren't out there talking about. So I'm super stoked for it. So let's dive right into my interview with Suzanne. All right, Susie, welcome to Young Smart Money. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for our listeners that aren't familiar with who you are and what you're up to, could you give them a quick little intro as to what you're doing on YouTube, what you're doing in the freelancing world, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm Suzanne. I'm 23, and I have a personal finance YouTube channel called Arvabelle, and that's kind of what I've been working on.
Sweet. Well, I'm excited to dive into it. So first off, 2020 just wrapped it up. How did it go for you? I know this was a pretty tumultuous year for a lot of people, lots of ups, lots of downs. So what was yours like?
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely like a hard year for a lot of people, but for me, it was a really good time to kind of focus in on what I was doing. And it was interesting too to kind of have everyone else enter into the work from home life. And so, I mean, that's really, it's made this year easier, or this past year easier. But yeah, it's been a great year for me. I've really like built up the YouTube channel and just had a lot of fun with what I was doing. So.
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, there's been a ton of traction there, so I'm super excited to dive into that. Well, I guess let's rewind a little bit and just like fill listeners in on how you got started in the world of like entrepreneurship, freelance work, and just like getting into this space. Because you're a young person, I'm a young person, and so a lot of our listeners are like, "Yo, how did she get started?" So, what did this path look like for you, and how did you first get like introduced to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so it really started after I graduated college. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. And I applied for 72 jobs. I heard back from one, had an interview, totally ghosted me. And after that, I was like, okay, I have to do something on my own. Like, this isn't going as planned.
Whoa, okay, but 72 applications?
72,
How long did that take you?
I was working on that for months. That was probably over a period of like 2 or 3 months. But
Oh, that sounds painful.
yeah, I still have the spreadsheet of like all the companies that rejected me. So, but yeah, I mean, it was tough graduating college and being stuck in that catch-22 of like, you need experience to get a job, but you can't get a job without experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really just decided that I did want to do something on my own. So I kind of had shiny object syndrome for a little while, jumping from thing to thing. So at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a day trader. And then I was like, no, I'm going to do like print on demand, merch by Amazon. And then I had always done like graphic design and web design just on my own. And I started getting a couple people interested in that, like from my dad's work or just like random friends of family members and stuff. And I kind of fell into freelancing that way. And by doing that, I realized, oh my gosh, there's like so much that I have to figure out about like how to run a business and my own finances, because I didn't have a paycheck coming in every week. It was totally up to me to make that income completely on my own, track it completely on my own. And I was the only one responsible for that. And so that kind of launched me into really searching things on YouTube. And that's how I found like Graham Stephan, Ryan Scribner, Nate O'Brien, like all that first group of finance people. That's really how I found them. So.
Dang, that's wild. So I think that's probably a pretty common scenario for like a lot of people that get interested or like involved in entrepreneurship, is like they kind of wind themselves into it accidentally, but then they realize there's like all of this financial stuff that they actually have to figure out, because when you're not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and your taxes withheld and like all of this stuff being done for you, it's like this whole new world of finances that like no one has prepared you for. So I'm stoked to dive into that. But before we do, I'm just curious, what did you study in school?
So I actually went to school for 3D animation. For a while, the dream was to work for Pixar. So it's still
Whoa.
kind of in the graphic space, but as I was doing that, I realized that I didn't actually enjoy it as much as I thought that I would, which is kind of hard, like at the end of college to be like, oh gosh, I just spent all this time and I want to do something else. But there's still so many experiences from that that I brought into what I'm doing now. So I don't necessarily see it as like a waste of time or anything. It was just like I ended up going a different path, and I feel like that's totally normal.
Yeah, that's totally real. I think a lot of people just expect that like, oh, I'm going to study this thing for 4 years and then like that's going to be my life path. And like a lot of times that's just not how it works out.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So you get this, you get some freelance clients, paying the bills a little bit. Fill us in on like how that translates. Like at the time, I'm assuming that wasn't like a ton of money. So how do you translate from that into like making a decent living online?
Yeah. So for the very first freelancing job that I got, what I did was I went back to like my old college curriculum and I stole the syllabus from like one of the graphic design classes because I still had my college login where you can like
Yeah,
access
yeah.
the courses and stuff. Yeah, so I was like, okay, so I took the syllabus from one of those like graphic design courses and I basically took their projects and I just like sped through them in like a week to make myself a portfolio to start with. And so that was how I got like my first job or two, was just using that little portfolio that I built up. And it starts out so slow when you're like freelancing or working for yourself. I think my first month freelancing, I literally made like $200. And
Jeez.
I mean, that has scaled. Now I've had months where I've done like $6,000, $8,000 just from like graphic design. So it's a slow curve up. It's not like you jump in and you're making a normal salary.
Yeah. So how did you, was it just like word of mouth or like how did you go from that like $200 month to like building out to like $8,000 months?
Yeah, so part of it was just like building up more work and building up more projects in my portfolio. Some of it was word of mouth, like one client. Oh, actually, a lot of it was word of mouth. It would be like one client had, an e-commerce business, and then they'd be like, "Oh, hey, my other friend is in e-commerce doing this other thing, but you already know how to do that. So, like, do you want to take on this project?" And I'd be like, "Sure." Um, but a lot of it too was using Upwork. That's what
Mm.
I freelanced through, and yeah, that was a good experience for me. But
Interesting. So I know a lot of people will tell you like go to Fiverr, go to Upwork to like get your initial like freelance gigs, but that was a pretty good experience for you because I've heard mixed things. So fill us in on that experience.
yeah, so I took totally random jobs at the beginning just to kind of get reviews, get a little bit of a portfolio built up, but a lot of it is those reviews. And it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like SEO ranking on Upwork. Like you fill out your profile, you put in as many projects as you can, describe them as best as you can, and like they'll rank you higher on that list as long as you have good reviews. So after like my first 3 jobs, I have never had to apply for a job again. I had clients come to me. So that's been
Wow.
awesome. That has saved me so much time. But yeah, Fiverr I haven't really used, but it can definitely go both ways. There are definitely some like spammy things on there, but there are people who make a full-time living off of Fiverr, so you just never know.
Dang. So is it really just the reviews or like do you have any other like strategies that worked well for you to like build up that initial traction?
It was just the reviews and also slowly raising my rate. And that's something that you
Mm.
can't be afraid of, is just like ask for more than you think that you're worth. And if they're like, hey, we don't have the budget for that, can you come down a little bit? Then that's totally fine. But you might as well ask for more and kind of just see what happens.
Yeah, I think
But
a lot of people are just afraid to like ask for more because they're afraid they're just going to get a hard no and the conversation's going to end there. But like in your experience, does it usually happen like that, or is it usually like a counter offer or like the conversation kind of continues?
usually the conversation kind of continues. And what I've found is that as I've raised my prices more, people are less likely to try to like bargain with me, and they're more willing to be like, okay, like they'll go through their list of questions, they'll be like, you know what you're doing, I'm going to pay you to get it done. Because people value communication. That's one of the biggest things, is just being able to respond, being able to really just being able to work with people.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like there's kind of like if you're pricing yourself like really really low, you're just getting like the scum of the earth that are trying to work with you, that have
Yeah,
like these drop shipping stores that are literally nothing, and like they're trying to
exactly.
like penny pinch as much as they can. But like once you get into like the upper echelon of more like premier pricing, I feel like the people that you're working with would be more like legit clients that are like actually know what they're talking about and aren't just trying to like scam you out of every dollar they can get, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely how it's played out. And then also having a YouTube channel mixed into that has been pretty interesting because since it is financial, um, sometimes that'll come up when I'm initially talking to clients and it totally changes the course of the conversation. They're like, "Oh, money, numbers. Like, here's a presentation that our CFO needs. Like, can you make a graph for that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So it's been interesting to see how those two things have kind of come into play.
Whoa. So when did you start your YouTube channel along the process of like doing this freelance work? Like how did that come into the picture?
I started the YouTube channel and freelancing full time pretty much at the same time. And
Oh.
I was like, one of these is gonna work. Let's just do both. See what happens. Um, so I mean, they both kind of took off. Now for this year, the goal is to switch over to YouTube full time, but we'll see how that goes.
Dang. Okay, so what brought the interest in finance? Because like the YouTube channel, you're talking about money stuff, investing, things of that nature. Where did that interest come from?
Um, I've always liked money and numbers and really just learning about it. I was always the kid that would have like bake sales on the weekends or be like selling jewelry or bracelets at school, random things like that. So I kind of, I guess, always had that spirit in me, but it was really like watching Graham Stephan, Ryan Scribner, Nate O'Brien, those initial group of finance YouTubers. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. There are people that are actually talking about this that are kind of around my age. So that was how I got into it. And actually, I DM'd Nate O'Brien like 2 years ago, and I was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel." And he responded, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you should do it." I was like, "Oh my gosh, a YouTuber thinks that I should start a YouTube channel. I should I'm gonna do it." And so a few months later, then I started. But
Wow. Yeah, I've got a very similar story, like watching those same YouTube creators, and I was like, shoot, like if they're doing that, like I should do this. And for me, I got on a call with Ryan Scribner and he was like, yo, you got to start a YouTube channel. And I was like, okay.
yeah, and now you're living with him, right?
Yeah. I'm in his attic right now. So
Nice. Yeah, it's funny how that plays out. And
yeah.
we met over Instagram too, I think. I think I shot you a DM and was just
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I love the podcast." And then
And then we met at FinCon and now here we are.
exactly.
Cool. So I want to dive into like when it came to like you're freelancing, you're making a little bit of money, you've got YouTube, you've got some money coming in. What were some of like the financial hurdles you ran into? Because obviously it's a lot different than like working a part-time job at like Dairy Queen or something, you know, when you're freelancing for yourself, making some YouTube income. So what were some of those hurdles that you ran into early on?
So I think the initial hurdle was that I had basically zero money because I was out of college. Like I had a little bit saved up, but it wasn't anything that I was particularly motivated to spend immediately. Um, but to get started, I did have to spend a little bit of money to make a little bit of money. So it was like initially buying the first camera, buying the first microphone, which doesn't cost a ton and you don't need super expensive equipment to do any of that. But it's like, paying for Adobe software, which is like $700 a year, something. Um, so it was figuring out how to make that work and then really just looking at, oh my gosh, how am I going to ever like survive on my own and how much am I actually spending every month and like what would I need to move out or to like eventually buy a house or anything like that.
Dang. So like what did your budgeting situation look like at that point? Like were you using like spreadsheets? Was it just like all in your brain or like what were you
Oh,
doing to try to navigate
I
that?
have been a spreadsheet user forever. So yeah, just in Google Sheets, have my whole little like budgeting thing planned out. And I had actually throughout college, I had tracked my expenses that like all throughout college, and I still have those spreadsheets. But just because I realized when I was in college that I was going to have to know how much money I actually needed to make to be able to survive. So yeah, I mean, I pretty much always just tracked it on spreadsheets.
That's the move.
I know that like Mint is popular and I actually I recommend that people use Mint to track stuff, but for me it's I don't know, there's something about like manually entering it into spreadsheets where I have complete control over it. I don't know.
No, you're literally speaking my language, because like I do the same thing. I like tell people like, yeah, you should probably use Mint, but like for me, like I have my spreadsheet that I built. I love it. It works great. It does what I need it to do. And like I'm just gonna keep doing that manually because like it just makes sense to me, you know?
Exactly. And it's like it's something that I look forward to every day. Like
Yeah.
opening up Excel and going through my spreadsheets. Super exciting.
You are literally speaking my language. Like this is my life. Wow. Okay. So going to college, did you have to take out any debt or anything, or were you able to like get through without having to go into student loan debt?
So I luckily did not have any student loan debt because I graduated in 3 years. I just like powered through it. I know that you graduated early too.
Yep. That's the
So
move.
yeah,
That's the move.
yeah.
Sweet. Well, yeah, that's got to be a huge leg up, because I mean, like, to have the freedom to like make such little income coming right out of school, I feel like that's something that like a lot of people don't have. And like I definitely took that for granted, because like I came out of school also with no debt, and so I was able to just be like, well, I can just live pretty lean now and just focus on like doing this online stuff, and not really have to worry about making the big bucks yet. And so I think that's a luxury that like is super helpful to like get something off the ground, because like a lot of times it doesn't just pop off right away. Like you said, like you got to start off making like a couple $100 a month to eventually scale that stuff up. So I think, yeah, I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind for a lot of people, is like, it really does help if you can keep those expenses low, especially coming right out of school.
Yeah. And even, I mean, I tell people that like if you need to live at home for a few years, like right now I'm still living at home. And like that's a great way to save money. And it's honestly a privilege to be able to live with your parents if you have like a safe environment to go back to. And if you're graduating, whether you're graduating with or without debt, like just having the option to live at home for free or for like a reduced rent it will put you at such a huge advantage.
Totally agree. I spent mid 2021 or mid 2020. I spent some time at home because like I got out of college and just went straight to Asia, just like put a backpack on and
I
like hopped on a
remember
plane.
that.
Yeah, but unfortunately there was this whole like disease thing that went around, so I had to come back real quick. But yeah, crashing with my parents for a few months was like such a solid move, because like you can save some serious cash, and it just like for me personally, like when I was living with my parents, I was so motivated to just like leave that
Yeah,
I was like
yeah,
working a lot
exactly.
harder, because I'm like, I cannot do this. Like I've got little siblings that were there and like always knocking on my door. You want to play Sorry? You want to play Just Dance? I'm like, I got to get work done.
Yeah. No, it definitely is motivating if you want to get out. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good force to have. Okay, but now your living situation is changing because you are buying a house. And so
Indeed.
this is very intriguing to me, because you are 23 years old, you do not have a W-2 job, and it's really just like a known fact that it's like it's difficult to get into real estate as someone who is self-employed, because banks find us risky, you know? They're like, well, you don't have a steady paycheck. How are we going to trust that? How's that going to work? So fill us in on that whole process of, well, I guess first off, how did you decide that you wanted to just buy a house? Because like you're living with your parents. A lot of people go from living with parents, rent an apartment, maybe buy a house, but you're just like living with parents, buy a house. So
Right.
why?
Yeah. So I had gone and looked at apartments at the beginning of this year. And then once the illness hit, I was like, okay, not a good move to like go move to a city where I can't do anything anyways. But basically what I was paying, or what I would have been paying in rent, would be like, I don't know, I could justify the mortgage on a new house more than I could justify paying rent. And that's just for me. I know that for some people paying rent does make sense depending on where you're living. But like I can write off part of the house for business because I
Yeah.
run my business completely out of my home. And there are just a lot of different benefits to that. And with the house, it's a new construction and they're able to put a full apartment above the garage. So we have like a house hacking situation going on. So
Wow.
that was really the thing, was like I wanted a duplex or like some sort of multi-unit thing. In Austin, it's super competitive. So the duplex thing was really hard to come by. And every place that I called, they were like, yeah, so like you can come look at it if you want, but we already have a cash offer. So like, I'm like, okay, cool. Not getting that one. So yeah, I ended up going with a new construction house, but it was definitely a new process to go through.
Yeah. So I guess walk us through that. I mean, like, I'm assuming you're doing some financing for it, or are you just paying
Yeah.
cash?
Oh, no, no, no. No, no, no. But I am doing the 20% down. And
Okay.
since I am self-employed, they usually like to see 2 years of income. But because my income has gone up so significantly from when I started, they're taking the last year and just looking at that. And I won't close for probably another like 4 to 6 months. So I still have a while, but they were able to like work with me on that and just look at the last year.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's nice. So who did you get that loan from?
It was like a local, kind of a local company. I don't think I want to say
Okay,
specifically.
okay.
Like I can tell you after, but yeah, it was through the builder actually. So
Oh,
um, it was their recommended lender, and then they were like they really wanted to make the sale, so they were like, yeah, we'll look at your last year. And I think that's pretty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that may be pretty standard to like look at the last year if your income is going up pretty
yeah,
significantly.
yeah, it's definitely, I mean, like the trajectory is definitely an important factor, but yeah, I guess so. I mean, just not specific names or anything, but like, was it like a smaller credit union or like, I'm assuming not like a huge regional or national bank or anything.
No, no, no. It was a small credit union.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think in most cases, like the local credit unions are generally more willing to like do business with our kind, just
Yeah.
because they're like they understand that we are like people, whereas like with your huge banks, they're just like looking at numbers. So
Right.
I think that
And
definitely does help a lot. Yeah.
I think it does also depend on what area you're in. So like Austin is very like artsy, a lot of tech people, a lot of people like starting their own businesses and a lot of startups. So I think they're a little bit more used to that there than if I went to some like rural city,
Yeah, like
you
middle of
know.
the Midwest, and they're
Yeah,
just like, "What are
exactly.
you? What is YouTube? Like this
Yeah.
sounds like a we don't know what that is."
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. So you're able to get a loan from the bank. You put 20% down. Wow. I'm just impressed. Like 23 years old, self-employed, buying a house. Like
Yeah.
that's
It's gonna be a process to go through, but it'll be good. I mean, like it is nerve wracking to I've never spent that much money in my life or like put it all into one thing, and so to see that is kind of like, oh my gosh, but at the same time, it's also motivating because I know myself and I know how I work, and I know that I have to like back myself against a wall a little bit to be able to like keep myself going. And I think even like Graham Stephan has mentioned the first couple of properties that he bought, he pretty much I don't know what I'm saying. Um,
just like had no money left over and was
yeah,
like, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly, yeah.
So in terms of like like was this so this it sounds like this was like a pretty big stretch in terms of like getting that down payment together in terms of like how much cash you had on hand. Like did you have to like sell stocks or did you have to like really make some cash available or was it kind of easy to come up with that money or how'd that work?
So I had when I first started freelancing, I opened up a savings account and I named it. I was like down payments. And
Really?
yeah, because
Wow,
that was
day
always the
one.
goal. I was like, I want to get into real estate so bad. So yeah, I had kind of been saving up for it from day one. And that was just where I put all of my extra cash was into that because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Um, and so instead of going more heavy into the stock market for like the last couple of years as I've been building this up, I was like, nope, house first, real estate first. Because that's just something that I always wanted to do. So
No, I respect that. I mean, you gotta have real like you gotta have focus because like the last couple years in the stock market's been like crazy and everyone's been freaking out. So
oh yeah.
like much respect for like keeping the eyes on the prize, and just like really focusing there.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So now that you've kind of gone through I guess not the whole process, but most of the process, like is there anything that you wish you would have known about like buying a house as a freelancer from the get-go that you now know that you're like, I wish I knew that before I like got started with this whole process.
So I wish that I had been a little bit more meticulous about like tracking my expenses and stuff, especially for the first year. I've been good about it this last year, but just having a record of like where the money is coming from and what it's going out to. Because when they're approving you for a house, they're going through all of that and getting all of that together. It's like, oh my gosh, I should have had a CPA. Like, yeah.
Hey, no, I respect that because yeah, I mean, probably, well, it depends on what your spreadsheet looks like, but in a lot of cases, like the spreadsheets that we make for ourselves probably aren't up to standard for a bank looking to give you a loan.
Right, right.
They need a little bit more concrete numbers there. Okay, cool. So I guess pivoting a little bit, that's most of the stuff that I want to talk about with the house. I mean, anything else regarding like buying this house that you think is important that other entrepreneurs, freelancers should know?
I would say just because other people are buying houses, like if that's not what you want to do, and even like all the finance YouTubers and stuff talking about buying houses, talking about buying real estate, if that's not something that you want to get into, it's totally fine if you rent. And in some cases, like it makes more sense. Um, but yeah, I would say like if you want to do it, go for it. Start talking to real estate agents early. And even before you're ready to buy a house, just so that you kind of know the processes that you have to go through, it's helpful just to kind of see all of that beforehand. So.
That's huge. Well, I guess for you personally, like what about real estate made you want to get into it so early?
Um, in high school, in the back of my pre-cal class, I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I
Yes.
was like, that was really what kickstarted it. And I don't necessarily now agree with like 100% of that book, but
Yeah, no.
those initial concepts, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And so even in college, I was like, how could I buy a house? But like, I was making no money in college, so it wasn't a possibility then. But
Oh yeah, I think that book really does a lot for a lot of people in terms of like at the very beginning stage, just like opening up their mind to like these different
yeah,
ideas of like compound interest and assets versus liabilities and like all this stuff that's like super important and super fundamental, but like where else are you gonna learn it, you know? Like
exactly,
they're not teaching it in pre-cal, like it's not like what you
exactly.
learn in high school. So that's huge. Well, I guess pivoting into like other entrepreneurial finance activities. So when it comes to like you personally, like your income streams, you've got freelancing with graphic design, you've got
Mhm.
YouTube. I think you're doing some like affiliate marketing as well, probably.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are like your main income streams besides like those? Or is that mostly it?
That's mostly it right now. I also have like tiny, tiny Etsy store where I sell just like little budgeting envelopes and stuff, which was kind of just a fun experiment. But yeah, I'd say most of my income right now is graphic design, YouTube, and affiliates. And I'm going to drop off the graphic design scene, go full time with YouTube. We'll see how that goes.
Wow.
Um,
When is that happening?
I'm in the process of like phasing out my current clients. So hopefully in the next couple months.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that?
Uh, Definitely nervous, but I think overall I'm feeling pretty good. Like YouTube is where it's at right now, and yeah, I mean it's just an exciting time to be able to be like creating on the internet, just like anything, a business, your own content, even if you're just like doing something for yourself, being able to put it online and see who else resonates with that, just really cool, and being able to make money off of it.
100%. I think the more that I focus on YouTube, I'm like, wow, this is like such a cool thing. You know, you get to just like talk about stuff that you like talking about and like people watch it and then YouTube gives you money. It's like, what? This is so cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Sick. Okay, so that's income streams. In terms of expenses, I mean, like where is your money generally going in terms of like the cost that you have?
So I pretty much spend no money. Um, um, I
Nice.
I would say majority of it, the money that I do spend is mostly business expenses. As far as like personal expenses, I don't really buy clothes. I don't really buy makeup. I don't really like. I kind of just use what I have and use it until I can't anymore. But yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say mostly business expenses.
Yeah. Well, okay. In terms of business expenses, like
Mhm.
what kinds of things is it like equipment or subscriptions or like
I'd say both. So I bought like a new camera this last year, and that was a little bit terrifying because it was a lot better than like my little $200, $300 camera that I started with, but it's made my life a lot easier. And then other than that, I'd say software subscriptions. You got like all your Google Drive stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you like have a strict like budget for your business or like basically when money comes in the door, like what happens? What's the process between like you get a check from YouTube or you get a check from a client and then what happens?
So I'll usually kind of know what I need to spend money on as far as the business goes, and I'll know like when my subscriptions are renewing or if I wanted to try a new program or anything. And so I'll set that amount of money aside plus a little bit extra, and pretty much everything else goes right now towards the house stuff. After I'm done with the whole house situation, then it'll all pretty much go back into the business, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So do you have like I'm assuming you have like separate business bank accounts and whatnot?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What about taxes? What do you do for taxes? Do you have like a separate account for taxes? Do you just kind of scramble 4 times a year to come up with tax money, or like what's that look like?
No, so I do just keep it like in my normal business accounts.
Okay.
But I track it on my spreadsheet, and I know that like, okay, this $1,000, that's for taxes in Q4. And like I can't touch that, can't spend that, can't do anything with that. Just give it all away.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people when they're first getting started, like, well, I guess when you were first getting started, did you know what taxes were going to be like? Did that kind of like
Oh,
blindside
absolutely
you?
not. Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. I even like setting up the business bank accounts, I thought it was going to be like go online, like how you set up a normal bank account.
Yeah.
Like, no, you have to come into our branch. You're like sitting in the bank an hour later, they're like asking you all this stuff about like the tax structure of your business and like, when did this happen? You're sitting there, you're like, oh my gosh, I was not prepared for this. But yeah, no, that totally blindsided me going into it and having to figure all of that out. Like, oh my gosh, what's an LLC versus like an S corp, and when, like, if I choose one, when can I switch to the other or switch back? And like, why am I paying so much in taxes? What's this 15% self-employment tax? Like, they're taxing me for not being employed. What?
Yeah, it's there's so much that people just like don't know going into it. So I mean, like in terms of you learning this stuff, like how did you learn this? Did you just like go to the IRS website and like start reading through tax code, or did you like find some good resources or talk to someone, or like how did you
YouTube.
learn this stuff? YouTube?
YouTube, yep. And then
Nice.
like going to the IRS sites and stuff and just like searching through it. But most of it genuinely was YouTube. It was just looking at like Value Tax, his channel.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and just other people posting tutorials of like, hey, this is how you file your LLC documents by yourself so that you don't have to pay someone $300. And that was another thing too, going back to your earlier question, was coming up with that money to like initially get started. A lot of it you can do yourself, or you can find someone really good who can do it for you for like a decent price. And that's so helpful. Like you don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get your business set up.
Yeah. So did you decide to do most of that stuff yourself, or did you find
Oh yeah.
people to do it for you? Okay.
Yeah. It was mostly like, if you can look it up on YouTube, then you're
Yep.
good. You can do it yourself.
Exactly, because like who wants to pay $300 or whatever to LegalZoom or whatnot to file your
Right.
LLC paperwork when you could just print it out from the Secretary of State website, fill it out, send it in, and you're on your way.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Well, do you have any like tools or resources that you use in terms of like your finances, or is it mostly just like money comes into the business bank account, you got your spreadsheet, and like that's pretty much all you need?
I pretty much just use a spreadsheet. Also, what's been helpful for me is setting up separate like savings accounts and checking accounts just for myself so that I kind of have a designated spot for where money goes. And just like really making sure that I stick to that and that I'm not mixing, like business expenses and personal expenses, or even just like, I never cheat and I'm never like, oh, I'm going to take that out of the house fund and put it into like the travel fund. But yeah, it's been helpful for me to just have those separate accounts and really like giving a spot for your money once it comes in.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, like, I think a lot of people don't really realize how important it is to like separate personal and business when they're just getting started. And like,
Yeah.
it's never really an issue until you get audited, and then it's a huge issue. So it's better to just like take care of that stuff early on and not have to worry about that. But in terms of like having different accounts and stuff, do you have like, are you talking like separate accounts for like a travel account and like I mean, you got a house account, but like you got like separate accounts for like your different goals and stuff?
Not all of them, but I'll kind of like group them together in one.
Oh.
So like, yeah, like you said, I'll have the house one, I'll have like a travel one, and then one for kind of like whatever business expenses I think I'm going to have, and then one that's like fun stuff, which not a lot of money going into that one. I'm focusing on the other stuff for now. That'll come later.
That's fair. That's fair. What do you use as like your banking? Do you have like a account with like one of those big banks, or do you have like an online account, or like what's your go-to banking situation?
I actually like the online accounts better.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Any banks in particular?
Um, I think, I don't know, like Capital One, Ally Bank, they all have like any of the ones with good interest rates. Really, I go for the interest rates,
Yep.
not so much like the bank name. Um, yeah, look for those good interest rates.
That's fair. I'm the same way. I keep most of my cash in like a big bank account just because like they allow me to like do wire transfers and stuff and just
Oh,
like I
right.
have more
Yeah,
flexibility and whatnot. But like I keep all my tax money in a high yield account because like those pennies add up, you know, and like
exactly. Exactly.
it definitely helps. All right. So in terms of like finances, at this point, do you like work with any like financial like professionals? Do you have someone that you talk to about like investments or taxes or bookkeeping or anything like that?
I don't, but I need to. For taxes and bookkeeping, definitely. Investing, I like to do on my own,
Sure.
but yeah, taxes and bookkeeping is not my forte. So
Understandable. Yeah, for a lot of people just getting started, like they like the business stuff or like what they're like good at, and then like all this other stuff that they just kind of have to do as a result of being a business owner is kind of like I'd rather not do that, you know? Like that's not where I shine.
right, and that's what you're getting into, right? Is
Yeah,
helping,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
helping
all that
entrepreneurs.
all that fun stuff that nobody likes to do except for me. So
Exactly. Maybe I'll work with you.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right, cool. So I guess that mostly wraps it up. That's most of the stuff that I wanted to chat with you about, just in terms of getting started, Upwork, and then buying a house. So
Yeah.
this is all really exciting. We'll have to check back in once you've got that house and you're moved in and you are working on getting a tenant, because I'm sure that's going to be a whole nother adventure of a
Oh
process
yeah.
becoming a landlord. So
Exactly. It'll be a learning process. And I think FinCon is in Austin this year, so you should
oh,
stop by.
shoot, that's like perfect timing. Wow,
Yep.
didn't even realize. All right, sick. Well, Susie, do you have any last kind of words of wisdom or anything you want to leave the listeners with today?
Um, I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people. Like people are a lot more willing to help than you think. So whether that's like reaching out to random people that you look up to on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, or even just like reaching out to professionals to help you with like your taxes or whatever financial things, because that's something that a lot of people do need. Um, and so just, I mean, people are so willing to help, but no one will know that you want help unless you ask. So that's my, those are my words of wisdom.
Mm, preach, preach. Yeah, I mean that's so true. There's so many like once I feel like once people get to like a certain level of just like they have enough for themselves, a lot of people are just like motivated to just like they want to give back to other people who are like on their way up and like give those opportunities out. So like I think that's huge and that's helped a ton for me. So
Yeah.
oh well, Susie, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if the listeners want to follow up with you, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Hey Susie Marie or on YouTube, and my channel is Arvabelle.
Cool, cool, cool. And we'll link all those up in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Susie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Apple.